She was a black woman in a nurse's uniform, bleeding in a parking lot in the rain. No one stopped. No one looked. The man who had put that cut above her eye was still walking toward her, and the system that was supposed to protect her had already failed her twice. So she ran. She didn't think. She didn't plan. Her hands found a door handle in the dark, and she pulled herself inside and locked the world out. And when she finally looked up, she realized she was sitting in the wrong car entirely. The man in the driver's seat didn't panic, didn't shout. He just looked at her. This beautiful, exhausted black woman with a gold bracelet on her wrist and blood on her scrubs, and said, with a calm that should have terrified her, "Interesting choice." He had a dragon tattooed on his neck, a luxury watch that cost more than her car. 3 men appeared from nowhere in 8 seconds when her ex-husband started pounding on the window, and Devonte Carter, the man who had beaten her, the man who had escaped justice 3 separate times, suddenly found himself standing in a parking lot, realizing he had just made the worst mistake of his life. Because the man whose car Ashley had climbed into wasn't just powerful. He had a wound that looked exactly like hers, and he had been waiting, without knowing it, for a reason to finally do something about it. What Devonte never saw coming, what even Ashley didn't understand until it was too late to look away, was that the most dangerous thing in that parking lot wasn't a fist. It was a man with nothing left to prove and everything left to burn. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click Join to become a member and help our channel. The rain had no business falling that hard on a Tuesday. That was the thought that passed through Ashley Carter's mind as she pressed her back against the cold tile wall of the hospital's side corridor. Not the throbbing above her left eyebrow, not the copper taste at the corner of her mouth, not the sound of Devonte's voice still echoing somewhere behind her. Just the rain. The unfairness of the rain. She had done everything right that night. She had stayed late on purpose, clocking an extra hour she didn't need, so that he would be gone by the time she stepped outside. She had texted her colleague Brianna from the supply room. "Dev was here again. I'm waiting him out." Brianna had replied with a phone number for a shelter. Ashley had saved it and said nothing else. She had worn her scrubs instead of changing, so she would look like she was still working. She had taken the side exit instead of the main lobby. She had done everything right, and he had still found her. She didn't know how long she ran through the parking lot before her hands stopped working correctly, before her body made decisions without consulting her mind, and her fingers closed around a door handle that gave way too easily, and she fell into the smell of cold leather and something dark and expensive, and she pulled the door shut behind her with both hands like she was sealing a vault. The silence inside was immediate, absolute. It took her 4 full seconds to understand that she was not alone. The man in the driver's seat did not turn around. He sat with the stillness of someone who had trained himself to never show surprise. A phone face down on his thigh, one hand resting on the steering wheel at an angle that suggested complete ease with everything around him. His profile was sharp in the dim light from the dashboard screens. His collar was open 2 buttons, and along the right side of his neck, disappearing behind his ear, a dragon moved in gray and black ink, as if it were breathing. He said, very calmly, "Interesting choice." Ashley's mouth opened. No words came. Through the tinted glass, she could hear Devonte's footsteps getting closer. She could recognize them. That particular rhythm, that weight. 3 years had taught her his sounds the way a sailor learns weather. "Please," she said. It was not a full sentence. It was not meant to be. The man with the dragon tattoo said nothing. He looked at the rearview mirror with an expression that gave away exactly nothing. His eyes moved from the mirror to the window to the mirror again. The way a person looks when they are not afraid of what they see, but are deciding what to do about it. Then Devonte's fist connected with the window. "Hey, you in there? That's my wife. Send her out." The man in the driver's seat turned his head for the first time. He looked at Ashley directly, and she felt it before she could describe it. He was not looking at her the way men usually looked at her in moments of distress. He was not evaluating whether to help. He was not calculating what he would want in return. He was looking at her the way someone looks at a thing they have seen before, in a different time, in a different face, and did not want to see again. His jaw tightened by a fraction. He lowered his window exactly 2 centimeters. "She doesn't look like she wants to leave." Devonte's voice climbed. "Man, you don't know what you're getting into." "No," the man said, still calm, still quiet. The kind of quiet that is louder than shouting. "You don't." What happened next took 8 seconds. Ashley counted them later, lying on a couch in a room she didn't recognize, staring at a ceiling that cost more than her monthly salary. 3 men appeared from directions that made no physical sense. Devonte's voice stopped mid-sentence. The sound of his footsteps retreated. The SUV didn't move for another full minute. Then the man in the driver's seat started the engine, and without looking at her again, said, "You should put something on that cut." Ashley touched her eyebrow. Her fingers came away red. She had done everything right that night, and somehow she had ended up here. She didn't ask where they were going. That fact alone told her something about the state she was in. Ashley Carter, who had spent 3 years asking permission for everything, who had learned to phrase every sentence as a question so it couldn't be thrown back at her as a provocation, sat in the passenger seat of a stranger's car and did not ask a single thing. She watched the Atlanta streets move past the rain-covered window and held the gold bracelet on her wrist between 2 fingers and breathed. The man drove without music, without conversation, without the particular tension of someone waiting to be thanked. She studied his reflection in the passenger window without turning her head. The dragon on his neck disappeared and reappeared as the streetlights passed over him in intervals. His hands on the wheel were steady. Not the steadiness of someone relaxed, but the steadiness of someone who had decided long ago that visible nervousness was a luxury he couldn't afford. He checked his mirrors with a rhythm that had nothing to do with traffic. "I don't know your name," she said finally. "No," he agreed. "You don't." She waited. He didn't offer it. "Mine is Ashley." "I know," he said. She turned to look at him directly for the first time. "How?" "Your badge." He glanced at the lanyard still hanging around her neck. "Still on." She looked down. Atlanta General Hospital. Ashley Carter, RN. She had forgotten she was still wearing it. She pulled it off and held it in her lap and felt, for a moment, like a person who had forgotten what their own body was doing. The building he took her to had no signage. The elevator required a key. The apartment on the 14th floor was the kind of clean that didn't come from cleaning. It came from being rarely used and maintained with precision. White walls, dark furniture, a window that looked out over the city like a painting. In the kitchen, someone had left bottled water and a first aid kit on the counter, as though they had known. "Someone was here before us," she said. "Yes." "You called ahead." "In the car, while you were watching the window." She stood in the middle of the living room and looked at him standing near the door, and the full weight of the situation settled over her all at once. Not fear, exactly, but the particular dizziness of realizing how completely outside her own life she had traveled in the last 40 minutes. "Who are you?" she asked. He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "Someone who doesn't like what he saw." "That's not an answer." "No," he said. "It's not." He left her with the first aid kit and closed the door behind him without locking it from the outside. She stood there long enough to confirm that. Then she sat on the edge of the couch and pressed a gauze pad to her eyebrow and stared at the city lights through the enormous window and tried to remember the last time a room had felt this quiet. She did not sleep, but somewhere around 3 in the morning, she stopped shaking. Kang Joon-Ho sat in the building's ground floor office with his second-in-command, Park Sung-min, and said very little for a long time. Sung-min knew better than to fill the silence. He had worked alongside Joon-Ho for 11 years. He understood that the silences were where the real decisions happened, that the words that came after them were not deliberation, but conclusion. When Joon-Ho finally spoke, he said, "Find out everything about a man named Devonte Carter. Atlanta resident, early 30s. He had a security license at some point. Run the name through the civil records, too, not just criminal." Sung-min wrote it down. "How deep?" "Deep enough to understand why 3 previous cases closed without charges." Sung-min looked up from his notebook. That was not a standard instruction. "This is personal?" Joon-Ho's expression didn't change. "It's a loose end. Loose ends become problems. Find it by morning." Sung-min nodded and left. Joon-Ho stayed at the desk. He opened the folder in front of him, the one he had been reviewing before a woman he had never met climbed into his car in a hospital parking lot and changed the shape of his evening. He read the same paragraph 3 times without absorbing it. Then he closed the folder. He thought about the way she had held the door shut with both hands, the particular desperation of that gesture, the way she had said please like it was the last word she had left. He thought about another woman, 7 years ago, a different city, a different parking lot, in a manner of speaking. Though the details were different, the shape of it was the same. The same silence before something breaks. The same moment where someone should have intervened and didn't. He had not been there for that one. He was here for this one. The report arrived at 5:47 in the morning. Sung-min slid it under the office door without knocking. Joon-Ho read it in 12 minutes, stood up, walked to the window, and looked at the city turning pale with early light. Devonte Carter had 3 prior domestic violence complaints. 2 had been withdrawn by the complainants under circumstances that shared a pattern. Sudden changes of address, sudden silences, the particular trail of a woman who had decided that disappearing was safer than proceeding. The 3rd had been dismissed on a procedural technicality that someone with the right connection had likely arranged. He also owed money. Not to a bank, to 2 men who operated under Joon-Ho's organization on the south side. Small debts, the kind that accumulate when a man bets on things he can't afford and loses with consistency. Joon-Ho read that section twice. Then he picked up his phone and called Sung-min. "The 2 south side accounts holding Carter's debt," he said. "I want them transferred to me, directly. Today." A pause on the line. "And then?" "And then," Joon-Ho said quietly, "we'll see what kind of man he is when the ground shifts under him." Ashley found the kitchen at 7 in the morning. Someone had stocked it overnight, not extravagantly, but with the kind of specificity that unsettled her. Orange juice, bread, eggs, a small container of the exact brand of coffee creamer that she hadn't realized she had a preference for until she was standing in front of it at 7 in the morning in a stranger's apartment on the 14th floor of a building with no name. She stood at the counter for a long moment, holding the creamer. and felt something cold move through her chest that had nothing to do with fear. Someone had paid attention. She made coffee. She sat at the dark wood table and watched the city wake up through the enormous window, and thought, with the particular clarity that comes after a night of not sleeping, about the shape of her life, the 3 years of it, the architecture of small surrenders that had built themselves, brick by brick, into the structure she had been living inside, the lowered voice, the rerouted routes home, the colleagues she had stopped confiding in because Devonte always found out, somehow, the way water finds cracks. She thought about her grandmother's bracelet on her wrist. Her grandmother had worn it every day for 41 years, had pressed it into Ashley's palm 2 weeks before she died, and said, in the particular voice she used when she meant something completely, "This doesn't come off. You understand me? No matter what that man says, this doesn't come off." Her grandmother had never met Devonte, but she had known men like him the way old women know weather. Ashley turned the bracelet twice around her wrist and drank her coffee and waited. He knocked at 9, not because the door was locked. She had confirmed again in the early morning hours that it wasn't, but because he knocked anyway. She found that significant in a way she couldn't immediately articulate.
"How's the eyebrow?" he asked, stepping inside, but not far.
"Closed," she said. "I'm a nurse. I know what I'm doing." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. The suggestion of one.
"I know."
She looked at him in the full morning light for the first time. Without rain, without the shock of the parking lot, without the disorientation of movement. He was composed in a way that went beyond posture. It lived in him, and yet, standing in a kitchen that someone had stocked overnight, holding a coffee cup with both hands, he looked, briefly, in one unguarded moment, like a man carrying something he had been carrying for a very long time. "You found out about him," she said. It wasn't a question.
"Yes."
"And?" He set a folder on the table without sitting down. She opened it slowly, and the morning changed shape around her as she read. The 3 complaints, the 2 withdrawals, the names of women she didn't know who had made the same decision she had almost made, over and over. Silence as survival strategy. Her hands were steady on the pages. She was surprised by that. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "What needs to be done?" That could mean a lot of things.
"Yes,"
he said.
"It could."
She closed the folder and looked at him directly. "I want to know which thing it means." He was quiet for a moment, the particular quiet she was beginning to recognize as his version of consideration. Then he pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, and for the first time since the parking lot, the vertical distance between them disappeared.
"He owes money to people who work under me," he said. "I've purchased that debt. His apartment has contractual irregularities that can be activated."
The 2 prior cases that were closed, the witnesses who went silent, didn't go silent because they wanted to. They went silent because someone made it easier to disappear than to testify. And now? Now it's harder to disappear than to testify. Ashley set down her coffee cup.
"You did all of this since last night."
"My people work quickly."
"That's not what I mean."
She leaned forward slightly.
"I mean, you did all of this for a woman you don't know who climbed into your car by accident."
The composure held, but something behind it, deep behind it, in a place he clearly didn't make available often, shifted by a degree she almost missed.
"I told you," he said. "I don't like what I saw."
"There's more to it than that." The silence stretched. Outside, Atlanta was fully awake now. Sirens somewhere distant. The hum of a city that never actually stopped.
Inside the apartment on the 14th floor,
Two people sat across a dark wood table and breathed the same quiet air. "I had a sister," he said finally. The words came out with the weight of something that hadn't been spoken aloud in a long time. Younger. She had a brightness to her, the kind that made rooms feel different when she walked in. Ashley didn't move. She was with a man for 2 years. I didn't know the full shape of it until it was very late. By the time I understood what was happening, she had already decided that leaving was more dangerous than staying. He paused. She was wrong about that. And she was right about that. At the same time. What happened to her? She left eventually. But the leaving broke something that didn't heal. His jaw set. The man was never charged. Never touched. Moved to another city. Probably found another woman with a brightness he wanted to put out. The air in the room felt very still. She was a nurse too, he said quietly. Different hospital, different city. Same bracelet type, actually. Her grandmother gave her one. Ashley's hand moved to her wrist without thinking. Joon-Ho looked at the movement. Something in his face, that fraction of an opening, closed gently, like a door eased shut rather than slammed. "I'm not doing this because of her," he said. "I'm telling you that so you don't misunderstand. I'm doing this because he has done it before, and he will do it again, and the system has demonstrated very clearly that it intends to let him." "And if I asked you to stop?" Ashley said. He met her eyes. "Then I stop at the halfway point." "What's the halfway point?" "The point where he can still walk, but can't run." She held his gaze for a long moment. The morning light came through the window at an angle that caught the dragon on his neck, and she thought, not for the first time, that this was the strangest conversation she had ever had, in the strangest room, with the strangest man, and that it was also somehow the most honest conversation she had experienced in 3 years. "Don't kill him," she said. "I wasn't going to." "I need to hear you say it." Something crossed his face. Not offense. Something closer to respect. "I won't kill him." "Okay," she said. She picked up her coffee cup. He stayed at the table. And outside, Atlanta moved through its morning, completely unaware that in a 14th floor apartment, a woman who had spent 3 years making herself smaller was sitting at a table with a man who burned things down and had, for the first time in a long time, been asked to show restraint. He found that he didn't mind. Devonte Carter's world didn't end with a bang. It ended the way most things end for men who have spent years believing themselves untouchable. Slowly, then all at once, in the particular silence of consequences that had been building underground for longer than anyone had told him. It began on a Wednesday morning, 48 hours after Ashley had climbed into the wrong car in the right parking lot. He woke to 3 missed calls from a number he recognized as one of the South Side men he owed money to. Not unusual. The calls had been coming for weeks. But when he called back, the voice on the other end was different. Cooler. More formal. The kind of voice that doesn't negotiate. "Your debt has been consolidated," the man said. "New terms. Full payment within 72 hours, or the collateral agreement activates." "What collateral agreement?" Devonte said. "We never had a collateral agreement." "You signed it 14 months ago. Page 3, paragraph 7. I suggest you read it." He found the document buried in his email, something he had skimmed and signed during a period when he had been drinking more than usual, and believing, with the confidence of a man who has never truly been held accountable, that the fine print would never matter. The collateral listed was his apartment lease,
co-signed through a holding company he had never looked into carefully enough to understand. By Thursday morning, his building manager had received formal documentation of a contractual breach. By Thursday afternoon, Devonte had called Ashley 14 times. She didn't answer. She had a new number, had changed it that same Wednesday morning, sitting at the dark wood table with a cup of coffee and a steadiness in her hands that surprised her. And the old number rang into a void that offered nothing back. He drove to the hospital. He sat in the main parking lot for 2 hours. He did not get out of the car. Not because he had chosen restraint, but because 3 men in dark clothing had positioned themselves at intervals around the lot in a way that was not accidental. And even Devonte Carter, who had spent years operating on the assumption that no one was watching, understood when he was being watched. He drove away. Ashley didn't see any of it directly. Joon-Ho had been deliberate about that, had structured the whole architecture of it so that her name appeared nowhere. Her presence implied nothing, her testimony untouched and uncontaminated by anything that couldn't be brought cleanly into a courtroom. Because that was the part she didn't know yet. The part Sung-min had arranged quietly through 2 intermediaries and a legal contact who owed Joon-Ho a favor of considerable weight. The 2 women who had withdrawn their prior complaints against Devonte Carter had been found. Not pressured, not persuaded by force, simply contacted by a lawyer who explained, with patience and without rushing, that the circumstances had changed, that the procedural technicality which had collapsed the 3rd case had been identified and corrected, that there was now a structure in place that could hold, that they would not be standing alone. The first woman said she needed to think about it. The second said yes before the lawyer finished the sentence. By Friday, the detective assigned to the reopened cases had called Ashley's work line. She took the call in a supply closet, the same one where she had once hidden from Devonte's voice in the corridor, and this time she stood straight against the shelves and spoke clearly, and did not lower her voice for any of it. Miss Carter, I want you to know that this time the case has been built differently. We have corroborating documentation, 2 additional complainants, and a legal team that has reviewed every prior dismissal. If you're willing to give a formal statement, we have a very strong foundation. Ashley pressed her free hand flat against the shelf beside her. I'm willing, she said. She gave the statement that same afternoon. Every word of it true. Every word of it hers. No one had told her what to say. No one had needed to. 3 years of living inside that story had made her the world's foremost expert on it. She walked out of the precinct at 6 in the evening into air that smelled like rain again, and stood on the front steps for a long moment and felt something she hadn't felt in so long that she had to stand very still to identify it. It was not happiness, exactly. It was space. The feeling of a weight that had been redistributed, not gone, but no longer located entirely inside her chest. She took the bus back to the apartment on the 14th floor, because she had not yet figured out where else to go, and because no one had asked her to leave. Joon-Ho was there when she arrived, standing at the dark wood table with the folder closed in front of him, the city burning orange behind him through the window as the sun went down over Atlanta. He looked at her face when she walked in and read it the way he read most things, quickly, accurately, without asking unnecessary questions. It went well, he said. Yes. She sat down across from him. The table between them felt different than it had 2 days ago. Smaller, somehow, or perhaps they were simply no longer sitting quite so far back from it. The cases are reopened, she said. 2 other women are coming forward. The detective said the foundation is strong. It is, he said. She looked at him. You built it. I removed the obstacles, he said carefully. You built it.
You walked in there and told the truth. That's not a small thing, Ashley. She had not heard him use her name before. It landed differently than she expected. Not with weight, but with a kind of quiet precision, like a key turning in a lock that has been stiff for a very long time. I want to ask you something, she said. Ask? Why did you stop at the halfway point? You could have done more. I know you could have. So why did you stop where I asked you to stop? He was quiet for a moment. Outside, the city shifted from orange to deep blue. Because you asked, he said simply. That's it? That's it. He looked at her steadily. I have spent a long time being a man who does what he calculates is necessary without asking anyone's permission. It is efficient. But it is also a way of deciding, quietly, that other people's choices matter less than your conclusions. He paused. You had already had someone do that to you for 3 years. I wasn't going to be another version of it, even a version that meant well. The room was very quiet. Ashley felt something move through her chest. Not the cold thing from the morning before, but something warmer and more complicated. The particular emotion that arrives when a person says exactly the right thing, and you realize you hadn't known you needed to hear it until the moment it was said. She reached into the pocket of her scrubs and set something on the table between them. The gold bracelet. Her grandmother's bracelet, unclasped, lying on the dark wood in the last of the evening light. Joon-Ho looked at it without touching it. I'm not giving it to you, she said. I want you to understand that. My grandmother gave it to me, and I'm not giving it to anyone. Okay, he said, but I want you to see it. Because you told me about your sister's bracelet, and I want you to know that this one is still here. That I'm still here. She paused. I thought maybe that mattered to you. For the first time since the parking lot, since before the parking lot, perhaps for much longer than that, Kang Joon-Ho's composure didn't hold completely. It didn't break. It simply became, for a few seconds, transparent. The man behind the calculation visible through the calculation, the way light passes through something you thought was solid. It matters, he said. She picked the bracelet back up and clasped it on her wrist. They sat at the table while Atlanta finished turning from blue to black outside the window, and neither of them spoke for a long time, and the silence was not the silence of absence, but the silence of two people who had said enough, for now, and were simply breathing the same quiet air. Devonte Carter was arrested 6 weeks later. The arraignment was brief. The evidence was not. Ashley testified on a Tuesday morning in a gray blazer she had bought specifically for the occasion, not because she needed armor, but because she wanted to choose what she wore into that room. She spoke for 11 minutes. She did not lower her voice once. The bracelet was on her wrist the entire time. Joon-Ho was not in the courtroom. His name appeared in no document, no filing, no record of any kind connected to the case. He had built the foundation from a room that left no fingerprints, and that was, she understood, exactly how he had intended it. She left the courthouse into sharp October sunlight and stood on the steps and called no one immediately. Just stood there. Let the air be what it was. That evening, there was a message on her new phone from a number she didn't recognize. No name. 4 words. The bracelet stays on. She read it twice. Then she typed back 2 words. Always has. She put the phone in her pocket and walked to her car. Her own car, in her own parking lot, at the end of a day that belonged entirely to her, and drove home through a city that felt, for the first time in 3 years,
like something she was allowed to move through freely.
And somewhere on the 14th floor of a building with no name, a man with a dragon on his neck sat at a dark wood table and read 2 words on a screen and felt the particular weight of something unfinished find, if not resolution, then at least rest. The rain, when it came that night, had no particular business falling, but it fell anyway, gently this time, like something that had finally been given permission. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever been in a moment where the only person who truly saw your pain was the last person the world would have expected? Someone society told you to fear, to distrust, to never ask for help. And have you ever had to choose between staying silent to stay safe or finally speaking, knowing that this time someone had quietly made sure the ground beneath you would hold? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about justice, dignity, and redemption, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.